Streaming television is by and large terrible. I hate wasting my time delving into a new show that not only fails to entertain me, but also makes me feel dumber and frustrated with wasted potential of premise and characters. There are a lot of projects going around that make zero sense as a business strategy, whose showrunners are also actively trying to give exactly the opposite of what the fans want from a show. Case in point, the thermonuclear waste that was The Acolyte. And because aimless and half-assed storytelling has become a norm in the American film industry, we cling for dear life to anything that is even remotely worth the wait and our time. Just look at the success of a movie like Twisters. Nothing special about it, a remake or rather a sequel to a movie that no one remembered, and because of its solid writing and performances, it has taken the cinemas by storm. Pun intended. But what happens when even the most anticipated show that proved in its first season to be a beacon of hope for quality storytelling turns out to be just another wasted potential? I hate to say it, but I was right to worry when I heard that Michael Sapochnik left the show at the end of season 1. I was worried when we heard reports of Olivia Cooke, Emma Darcy, and Matt Smith having conflict with the writing team. And finally, I hate that I was right in knowing that George R.R. Martin's comments leading up to the release of this season weren't just arbitrary observations about the state of storytelling in adaptations in general, but about the writer's room of The House of the Dragon. Now, after finishing the whole season, we know for sure, and no one is more disappointed and frustrated than me. Maybe only Martin himself, judging by the long essays he chose to post exactly on the eve of episodes that started to change the lore of dragons in his world. And before we start to analyze the many failures of this season, I just wanted to preface this by saying I don't believe film adaptations should be 100% faithful to the source material. Film is an entirely different medium, and because of that, there are many things that work perfectly in a book but fail to translate into a screen. But the core of a story, and by its extension the characters, have to feel as if they have literally stepped out of the pages of the book. Otherwise, there is no point in claiming it as an adaptation. You can change the order of events, merge certain characters to accommodate limited screen time you have in a season, and play with the elements of the story to fit the tone you wish to convey. But you can't change central characters, their traits, motivations, and their conflicts without completely abandoning the story you are telling. Because the biggest issue with The House of the Dragon Season 2 is that it believes its story is having the same impact as the book does. But in reality, the writers are either deleting the elements that make the story logical or completely changing the motivations and choices the characters make. None of the events occurring feel as tragic as they are supposed to be. Nothing is making an impact on the narrative, and it feels like we haven't moved on the chessboard at all since the ending of season 1. So let's start with the writer's biggest sin, which is Rhaenyra versus Alicent. The Princess versus the Queen, as the title of the original novella goes. This story and this war has always been about the princess versus the queen. The choose your side marketing for the show even displayed the colors of Team Black and Green, the colors that the sides chose to embrace because of the dresses these women decided to wear. They are our main characters, and yet they are responsible for nothing and are completely irrelevant in the events unfolding in season 2. I feel like the writers of the show are so preoccupied with pseudo-feminism of women good, men bad, that they forget to make these women interesting and characters you would want to root for. You essentially are asked to choose the team based on characters that make no decisions, take responsibility for nothing, and are framed as perpetual victims. What the writers cannot see is that in removing all of their fiery nature and their morally ambiguous decisions, they made them into unlikable characters. Overly sanctified, passive and pathetic leader with Rhaenyra, and wishy-washy entitled hypocrite with Alicent. We don't need to be reminded that Westeros is not a friendly place for women with these characters. We know this. It has been established over and over again that this world does not favor the women, the cripples, the bastards, and the broken things. Season 1 executed it perfectly, even before the story started in the prologue.
Rhaenys, a woman, would not inherit the Iron Throne. The Lords instead chose Viserys, my father.
The constant repetition of cruel men and women, the gentle peacemakers, shows a shocking lack of trust in the audience's intelligence and ability to understand nuance. Why doesn't Rhaenyra ask Daemon to behead Vaemond? Why doesn't she order Rhaenys to go to Rook's Rest? Because she needs to be absolved by the writers of all of these choices. Any mistakes that later on play a vital role in the conflicts. Why didn't she order Jace to go to the twins? Even claiming the dragons by the dragon seeds has been his idea, not hers. Why didn't she send Daemon to Harrenhal? Oh yes, because this Rhaenyra is harder on her allies than on her foes. She slaps her trusted advisors who are making complete sense, but embraces the traitors and people who have endangered her family multiple times just because they are women. She seeks comfort and advice from Mysaria, even though Mysaria shouldn't be allowed this level of trust at any point in this story. Taking away screen time from a relationship that would have been much more interesting and vital to the story with her son Jace, who we still haven't fully delved into, even though we should have, based on the timeline of events that will unfold in Season 3. Ultimately, it feels like the writers want to champion women, but they lack the comprehension skills to see which women in this story deserve to be championed. Why is Jane Arryn openly hostile towards Rhaenyra and not the feminist icon she was in the books? Why are Rhaenyra's relationships with Laena, Harwin Strong's sisters, and Elinda Massey replaced with Mysaria, that was never a character that possessed any integrity or goodness? Is it because they are hell-bent on framing Daemon as the villain of this show, and Mysaria and Rhaenyra are his helpless victims? At some point, she's more angry with Daemon than with Aemond, who murdered her son. She's willing to forgive Alicent and wants to run away with her, even though she was the one who poisoned her kids against her and led to Luke's death. There are so many moments in this season when we are asked to follow the logic of screenwriters, only to realize, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Also, framing Daemon as the villain in this story has to stop. They have already erased his positive relationship with his daughters, and instead of him being Rhaenyra's most ardent supporter, they made him leave her and contemplate becoming a traitor. And to be clear, I am not making a case for Daemon being a virtuous hero. Not at all. One of the many reasons why George R.R. Martin's world is so interesting and beloved is because all of the characters in it have the capacity for both good and evil. I don't want to harp too much on the Daemon storyline because, if I'm being honest, his scenes at Harrenhal are the ones I enjoyed the most in this season. I love the fact that in the opposition to the Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon showrunners are not shying away from the magic of this world. But the crux of all of those scenes is unfortunately that we are watching this show in hindsight. We know how the story ends and we hated that ending, so every reminder of the prophecy and every vision of the future is not having the desired impact on the audience. As much as I enjoy seeing Daemon struggle with the guilt over his brother and younger Rhaenyra, every mention of the prophecy is making me cringe internally, because you can sanctify Rhaenyra all you want. She can be the most flawless, perfect woman to have ever existed. It still will not change the outcome of Daenerys' story. Rhaenyra is not your feminist replacement for Daenerys, and if you will continue to watch this show with that attitude, you will be gravely disappointed again. The writers seem to be more concerned with making up for Game of Thrones than for making House of the Dragon an engaging and compelling story. Main characters appearing for minutes in an hour-long episodes and being completely passive in their own story will not make them more likable, but the outcome will be entirely the opposite. Just like Rhaenyra was never supposed to be a saint, Alicent was never supposed to be sympathetic. And here I was willing to go along with the changes based on how Season 1 was unfolding. Aging her down and making her Rhaenyra's best friend in the show was foundation for an interesting and tragic story filled with drama of lost love and friendship in the quest for power and self-preservation. But instead, the whole Aegon prophecy misunderstanding was a self-serving tool for the writers to absolve Alicent from any responsibility for the war. The truth of the matter is, the writers have no idea what to do with her. She changes her mind every other scene. She makes decisions that make zero sense for the character that she is in the show. The writing is trying to tell us that we are supposed to feel sorry for her, but her actions and the way she treats her family makes her completely reprehensible in my eyes. She constantly complains about her sons being monsters, and yet she was the one who raised them in hatred for their cousins and sister and in fear that they will be killed by their kin. It's mind-boggling how many hoops you have to mentally jump through to be able to even follow this character's logic. And yet, Rhaenyra forgives her, and writers try to justify these choices by claiming the unreliable narrator argument.
History will paint you a villain. A cold queen. Grasping for power and then defeated.
Let them think what they must.
The problem with the unreliable narrator is that you can't argue with the facts in the historical book. You can argue with the rumors, the sexual escapades of Rhaenyra and Daemon, or how many bastards the Targaryens have. You can't argue with the facts of who and why started this war, and who is still at the helm of it. And you definitely can't add things that make zero sense in the world and to these characters. You can't make dragons bond with another rider if you left their true rider alive in this version. You can't make them wander around like nomads when they only live on Dragonstone and in King's Landing. You can't suddenly make the dreamer astral project to another one's vision, especially when Helaena helping Daemon against Aemond is completely illogical, since he was the one who ordered the death of her son. Not to mention how much the writers are spoiling their own story with these scenes. Why take away from Rhaenyra's amazing achievement and plainly telling the audience what will happen next season, just to make Alicent look good? And since when are Helena's prophecies so precise? Only when she's asked to divulge spoilers for the story, it seems. And with A Son for a Son, we are once again back to square one, because this whole season could have been an email. There is no progression in the story. We ended season 1 with seemingly Rhaenyra telling us with her look, now all bets are off, and the war begins. And yet, in this season, we are regressing. Once again, Rhaenyra is still trying to keep the peace even though she has lost a son. Daemon gets her revenge for it, but Jaehaerys' death is not acknowledged by anybody by the time we reach the finale. Daemon goes on a journey to accept Rhaenyra's right to the throne. Again and again. Nothing changes. We keep going in circles. Lack of proper payoff in the story for this season kills any pacing or excitement about the ending. The dialogues are clunky, the tools the writers use to introduce the characters that will be important later on are very transparent, and on the whole, with a show of this magnitude, we deserved so much better. And what is the most heartbreaking about this is that this is still the best show on television right now. It has an amazing cast that is giving incredible performances, production design is unmatched, and the Battle of Rook's Rest was one of the best 20 minutes of dragon fighting I could have hoped for. A scene that I will definitely be rewatching for years to come. But I won't let these few minutes of incredible action fool me into saying that this season was good. It wasn't. The writers have to decide what kind of story they are trying to tell, and finally stick with it. And I can already hear the comments saying, oh, so you just want every episode to be Battle of the Bastards? No, actually, I hated Battle of the Bastards because it made no sense. My favorite season of Game of Thrones were season 1 and 2, where the mastery of the scripts for every episode was palpable. And every conversation, every slow moment between characters, every new relationship formed was building up to something. Here, we don't have the build up to anything. The perfect analogy for the writing in this season are all the scenes with Rhaena running after Dragon in the Vale. It makes no sense, it didn't happen in the books. The people in charge should have been there in seconds to stop her or protect her, and every time she catches up to it, he eludes her and she is running and running in circles. Just like we were this season.